Stakeholder engagement is the sixth chapter, and if you remember from PMP, this was one of the knowledge areas. So the behavior of stakeholder engagement is going to be almost the same as project stakeholder engagement, but there will be a level of a commitment is different. You see, the difference is the stakeholders of a portfolio are different than stakeholders of a project, and naturally the level is higher, so they have to be engaged in a more in a different way. So that is the only difference. Otherwise, this is one and the same thing. I think we can be, although there are about 50 slides on this chapter, but I suppose that we have got around, before your meeting, we have got quite some time. We can finish it. About 75 minutes are there.
Thanks.
What do you think?
Sure. And if not, we can just take a break. I've got time beyond that. Just we can take a break at that time. That's all. But sure.
Okay. Let's see what we can do. So this is the agenda. First, naturally, the overview, guiding principles, definition, and identification. So rest everything.
Your screen. I'm not saying your screen.
Okay. Let me see what is the problem.
There we go. Thank you.
So now you can see it.
Yes.
So this is it. Overview, guiding principles, definition, and identification. And from identification, the thing starts. Identification of portfolio stakeholder, analysis, planning, identifying communication management approach. You see, communication is not a separate knowledge area. So you can consider that stakeholder engagement and communication management in portfolio is encapsulated in this one domain.
That was going to be one of my questions. I was trying to figure out if that was the same or not.
So this is identifying the communication management approaches and then manage portfolio communication. So in a way, last two are communication. These three are about the stakeholder, and that's about all.
Yeah.
Starting with the stakeholder engagement, organizational strategy defines the path of an organization toward achieving its vision. Right? So we are at the portfolio level, we derive all our strength and understanding from the organizational strategy, because we have to always and every time remain aligned with that. So keeping that in mind, we are always focused on the organizational strategy and the vision of the organization. How can we achieve that vision, right? So portfolio management is a means by which an organization implements a defined strategy. Whatever strategy we devise, whatever the strategic plan the organization has, that is usually implemented through the portfolio management, and that is the change related initiatives which we call projects and programs. So they are all encapsulated into the portfolio management. So they implements a defined strategy by directing the limited resources of the organization to the portfolio components that most support the strategy realization. So this much is for the portfolio management relationship with the organizational strategy. The implementation of an organizational strategy is also important for other organizations or individuals dealing with the organization. Now, when we have described our organization and our portfolio management, now we are saying that other organizations who are working with us, are working, dealing with us, they also need to understand what we are doing and what our strategy is. So what I am referring here, I am trying to create a justification that anybody who is dealing with my organization and needs to understand my organization strategy is my stakeholder. Hope you understand my point.
Yes.
So anyone who is interested in dealing with my organization, they have to understand how we implement our organization strategy, and therefore they become our stakeholder. And a formal definition for a portfolio stakeholder is that they are the individuals, organizations, or groups that can affect or that can be affected by or perceive themselves to be affected by our decision, activity, or outcome of a portfolio. I don't know what you understand from this definition, although you have studied the same definition in project management also for the stakeholder management. For the stakeholder. Here
Yeah.
it's specific. Only difference is we call it portfolio stakeholder, but the definition remains the same. Okay, let me put a little bit of emphasis on this definition. Anyone, from my words would be anyone and everyone who has anything to do with your project or your portfolio would be a stakeholder. Anyone and everyone who has anything to do with. Now, let us justify this according to this definition. Anyone and everyone could be an individual, could be a person, or could be a group of people, or could be a whole organization. Especially in case of a portfolio stakeholder, it could definitely be the whole organization. So anyone and everyone includes individuals, organizations, and groups. Now there are two ways anyone and everyone could be affected. One is that they are able to affect my organization or my portfolio, so they are affecting us. And the other scenario is that there are stakeholders who may be affected by what we do. So they can be people who can impact or affect our portfolio, our organization, or who can impact or affect, can be impacted or affected by our organization. Whatever the portfolio we are doing, a portfolio stakeholder is the one who is somehow affected by our portfolio, or he can affect the consequence of the stakeholder. So he has to be a key stakeholder, key portfolio stakeholder to affect the consequence of the portfolio. So there are two categories. One who can affect the portfolio, and the other who can be affected by the portfolio. And there is yet another third category, and these are those people who perceive themselves to be affected by our decision, activity, or outcome of a portfolio. What does that mean? Who perceive themselves to be affected by? Actually, they are not. Yes?
Yeah, it could be anybody.
It could be anybody. But you see, they do not fit into the first two categories. they cannot affect our portfolio. They, according to our understanding, they cannot be affected by our portfolio. But they think that they can either affect or be affected by any decision, any activity, and any outcome of our portfolio. Such people cannot be ignored. They have to be classified as stakeholders. Why? Because, they, for example, I'll give you an example of a smaller thing, a project or something like that. For example, I am trying to construct a school. Who are my stakeholders? If I say it is for the students, so students are my biggest stakeholder. And then the teachers, they are my second biggest stakeholders, right? Then the families of the students, then the people working in the school, right? And then the society at large, the the roads connecting the school, the traffic will be affected there. So lot many people are stakeholders. Then the people who are going to construct it, then the people who are going to lend the land for it, and so on and so forth. So they are the people who are either affected by or who can affect. But there was one person whom I never considered, a stakeholder. For example, you sitting in USA, you think that the school I am constructing here in Pakistan can impact you. I say why and how. You say okay, the child which will learn there, he will one day come to USA and he might meet me, and I may have to give him a job or something like that. So
Yeah.
I am also a stakeholder.
Yeah.
Well, this is a very you perceive yourself to be affected by that thing, but apparently it is not. But you see, if I say no to you, no, you are not my stakeholder, what will happen? You will be angry. You would say, well, I will not let this project happen because you are not considering me. So you
Yeah.
can do things which can somehow hinder the progress of the project or may sabotage it altogether. Right? I don't want
Yeah.
you on my wrong side. Right?
Yeah.
So I must understand, why do you think that you are a stakeholder? And I must honor that and treat you as a stakeholder and deal with you accordingly. So let us apply this to the portfolio stakeholder. Portfolio stakeholder is the one who is dealing with the strategy of the organization, who is aligning things according to that. So anyone and everyone who can affect the portfolio somehow, the working of the portfolio, its alignment with the organization strategy, who can affect that, naturally that I would say big key stakeholder. And anyone who can be affected by, no, who can be affected by my portfolio? Even my components will be affected by that. My program managers, my project managers, project and their teams and all of these people are my stakeholders. People within my organization are my stakeholders. People outside of my organization are my stakeholders, and lot many things, a lot many people. And lastly, at the portfolio level, the perceiving stakeholders would be much more and much greater, because portfolio is not really like a project, not very definitive. It's not a school being constructed. It is something which is very much in air. We don't know where our portfolio will be moving next. Maybe it moves into your area. I don't know. So if you think that you might be the stakeholder for this portfolio, I must really listen to you and pay some heed to it because you might really be right. So portfolio is a high level thing. And at the portfolio level, we cannot be very specific. So I think this perception thing, perceive yourself to be the affected by our decision, activity, or outcome of a portfolio, probably it applies to. So that way, uh, my simple definition: anyone and everyone who has to do anything with the project is a stakeholder. Yes, that might look okay, but this is the good definition. It's a big definition and all-encompassing. It says stakeholders are people, organizations are groups, right? So anyone and everyone. And what are the categories? Those who can be affected, who can affect, those who can be affected by, and those who can perceive they are affected. And ultimately, this is to be uh, affected by some decision, activity, or outcome of portfolio. Now, mind it, when I am defining the portfolio stakeholder, I am definitely not defining the program stakeholder. I am definitely not defining the project stakeholder. Or yes, to some extent, I am taking help from the organizational stakeholders. Organization stakeholder, most of them might be my stakeholder. Most of them, maybe not all, but most of them might be my stakeholder. But at the same time, all the projects and programs uh, we will give birth to, all of those people will be our stakeholders, and even more. So this is not a small feat. This is not small, easy to understand. Identification of stakeholders at the portfolio level could be a huge endeavor. In addition, individuals, organizations, and groups that could affect the organization's ability to achieve its objective. Now, this is something which is at the level of the organizational strategy. It is affecting the organizational strategy. People, maybe our opponents, maybe our competitors, who are trying to sabotage our organization, or maybe somebody wants to help our organization. So these people are the people who are having the ability to achieve, or who could affect the ability to achieve our objective, either positively or negatively, should also be treated as a stakeholder. This is the second part of this definition. A large number of individuals and groups could be considered stakeholders, being somehow directly or indirectly affected by portfolio. Now you see, we have got a lot many things. Those who can affect, those who can be affected by, and those who perceive. Then we have the feature of positivity and negativity. All the stakeholders in the first definition, which we have seen, they could either be positive or negative to the initiative or to the portfolio. Maybe positive and maybe negative. But we have to deal all positive and negative as stakeholders. And then third distinction is they may be directly affecting or they may be indirectly affecting. And this indirect thing is somehow very closely related to perceive themselves to be affected by, right? So that must be, in most of the cases, that would be indirect. But you just make a point here that anyone directly or indirectly affecting you or or is affected by, are they perceived? So all of these people are stakeholders, no matter they are positive or negative. So yeah, these are three sentences which you can consolidate into a one single definition, but just note down the points. When it comes to engaging and communicating, there is a second part. First is the engaging, and second is communicating. When we know and understand who our stakeholders are, we identify them, then we need to engage with them. We need to try to understand them, what they want. What kind of a stakeholder this one is. And then we try to keep the communication lines open with them as if to keep the system transparent to all possible stakeholders. The question is on whom to focus and how to condense the long list of potential stakeholders. In portfolio, we have got an unlimited list of stakeholders. So what we can do is we can prioritize them. We can prioritize them and naturally pay more attention to those who are at the highest level of priority. The stakeholder list at the portfolio level is significantly different from the list at the portfolio component level. That means program and project stakeholder list might be very different from the portfolio stakeholder list. The difference is not only related to stakeholder level. Level is definitely increased. Frequently, a portfolio level stakeholder will be a higher management level, but is also related to the level of interest of the involved stakeholder. We have to understand that maybe somebody is not interested in your component, in your program or your project, but they are interested in the strategy of your organization and they want it to succeed or not to succeed. So whatever the case may be, they are your stakeholders at organizational level as well as the portfolio level. You have to be watchful of all such stakeholders. Portfolio stakeholder engagement deals primarily with delivering strategies and allocating resources. Basically, what we need to understand here at the portfolio level is that all the stakeholders are transparently kept abreast with what is happening. I would say, for me, the biggest thing I can count towards portfolio stakeholder engagement is transparency. The system should be clean and clear. Everybody should be on the same page. So, primarily, we are delivering strategies and allocating resources, because whatever strategy of the organization we are fulfilling, automatically some of the stakeholders will be affected by them. And when we are allocating resources, that is again, we are dealing with stakeholders. Whereas programs deal primarily with benefit management. We are not really concerned about benefit management. That is a secondary goal. But our primary goal is aligning with the strategies. So yes, that is the level. And at the project level, we are dealing with the deliverable, which is delivered on scope like quality, scope, time, and cost, and all that. So we, at the stakeholder level, we are at the portfolio level, our stakeholder is much different from that of a project or even of a program. These different interests mean that different roles will be considered for the stakeholders of a portfolio versus the stakeholders of a component. But I don't say that a person who is a project stakeholder cannot be a portfolio stakeholder, but all the people who were the project stakeholder or the program stakeholder, all of them cannot be portfolio stakeholders. Some of them may be, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not closing the door towards the project and program stakeholders, but I'm just saying that you have to raise your level. You have to raise your level of engagement to those who are directly impacted by your strategies, by fulfillment of your strategies, positively or negatively. An integral part of stakeholder engagement is portfolio communication. Now, this communication management is happening where? This communication management is happening continuously. I I suppose I think communication isn't it the last eighth eighth domain is not communication.
I think it's risk.
Seven, next domain is value,
Yeah,
and the last one is
risk. Risk. Yeah, number 8 is risk.
risk. So that is not a separate area. So we have got communication built into the stakeholder engagement. Right. So the communication strategy which we develop to interact with these stakeholders, it focuses on generating and or obtaining relevant data and on satisfying the most important information needs. So two ways. What do they want? How can we satisfy them? All the stakeholders, portfolio level stakeholders, we want to uh, get some information from them, relevant information from them, and provide them the important information where required, so that effective portfolio decisions are made and organizational objectives are met. So this is our objective, portfolio decision making and organizational objectives. Transparency, as I said, I imagine transparency is the biggest feature, and that will, it is right to say that transparency is due to communication, is not uh, integral part of the stakeholder engagement. So transparency may be a communication strategy to mitigate the risk of inadequate communication. Because you might be afraid that the communications we are doing with the portfolio stakeholders may be insufficient. So to bridge that gap, we try to bring this strategy into play, which is transparency. Right? Transparency with priorities and status provides credibility for the portfolio manager, enables good relationship with stakeholders, and helps reduce the change of resources working on efforts that are not aligned with the organizational strategy and so we'll keep abreast with all our stakeholders through consistent communication and a transparent kind of a relationship, and we'll keep ensuring that we always remain aligned with our organization strategy and objectives. So this is what the portfolio overview of this stakeholder engagement is. Here we talked about the main stakeholder groups. We talked about the wider stakeholder circle, purpose of stakeholder engagement, benefits of effective stakeholder engagement, iterative steps. I think they will come later. They will come later. And portfolio communication. Yes, of course, we talked a bit about everything, but that was just an overview, right? So let's move on. What else we have in this overview? Stakeholder engagement includes practical implementation topics such as working with portfolio stakeholders to maximize portfolio and organizational performance. So basically, when we work with these stakeholders, our portfolio or organizational strategy is facilitated. Our portfolio manager communicates frequently with stakeholders using modes and techniques appropriate for the context. The portfolio manager facilitates communications among stakeholders to negotiate agreements and make portfolio decisions. Just think big. The only thing is, otherwise, there is no difference in what the stakeholder engagement is or the communication management is as compared to program or project management. But here we are thinking big. We are talking about big stakeholders, which are affecting at the portfolio level. Three main stakeholder groups. Naturally, at a very high level, executive leaders and managers of an organization, they could be internal or external organizations and individuals working for a portfolio component. If there is a person who is, a stakeholder to a program or a project, not all of them, but some of them may be directly interested in how this project or program is ultimately adding up to the organizational strategy. So these stakeholders have a strong personal interest connected to the funding and direction of the relative component. Then we have got internal or external users and customers of the portfolio component. There's a third party component, the third party stakeholder. I mean outsiders, right? And I don't say the outsiders are not less important. They are as important, but they are the people who could be customer. Customer is the biggest and the most important stakeholder normally. Users and people, but they are not part of our project, or our portfolio, or our organization. So yes, let's include all of them. Together with these main stakeholder groups, many other stakeholders can be affected by a portfolio. Process owners, suppliers, individuals responsible for governance. You see, we have never talked about governance when we talked about the stakeholders. Governance was never a subject. But here, because the portfolio governance is created by the executives and the steering committee and all, so they all are stakeholders then. Shareholders of the organization, governments, and even the public at large. So my definition is correct. Anyone and everyone. The successful execution of the portfolio and its components, which has a strong impact on the interest of these stakeholders, is also heavily influenced by them. Anything which could impact the stakeholder and the portfolio, those things can have influence on these stakeholders as well, affecting or affected by. Portfolio stakeholder engagement is concerned with the forms of communication. Now we come to the communication. Now we have identified the stakeholder. We have to engage them, to communicate with them. We have to do that. Forms of communication directed to inform, influence, and enable stakeholders at the portfolio level. Engaging stakeholders is not the end objective of the activities and approaches described in this section. So this is just a starting point. Rather, it is a means by which the portfolio manager supports the achievement of excellence in executing defined strategies by keeping the system completely transparent. This implies enabling transparency, responsibility, accountability, and fairness, ensuring that investments in portfolio components are aligned with the organization's strategy. Now, this is interesting. Investments in portfolio component, the money we are going to be spending on the programs and projects to fulfill this component, this portfolio, all the investments are aligned with the organizational strategy and governance practices, and obtaining and maintaining the sponsorship and engagement of senior management and key stakeholders. Now, effective portfolio stakeholder engagement and communication management will together foster a culture that embraces change and risk. Now, while we are implementing the stakeholder engagement and communication, we are embracing the change management and risk management. So they are happening simultaneously while supporting organization in navigating complexity, which I defined a little while ago. Navigating complexity to enable successful outcome. So here is a reference to the practice guide, namely navigating complexity. Uh, you must download it. It's not a very thick book. For your own interest at the project, program, or portfolio level, no matter what. But this complexity, navigation of complexity is very well defined there. Although I have given you a little bit of hint that complexity is due to two things. One is the number of components interacting with you, and the second is the number of interactions, interactivities, interconnections amongst those various components. Well-engaged stakeholders have a clear understanding of the portfolio value and direction. If you have brought in transparency and your stakeholders are well engaged, that really means that they do understand the value of the portfolio and the direction it is taking. They are transparently informed regarding the impact of the portfolio on their interest and will have as much opportunity as possible to align these interests with the interests of the portfolio. Stakeholders with opposing interests are enabled to reconcile their expectations in light of the higher value of strategy realization. Got it?
Yes.
Okay, now the key iterative steps of stakeholder engagement. We identify, we analyze, then we do the engagement planning, and then we do the engagement activities. Now, as far as stakeholder identification is concerned, it is as we understand risk identification is as any kind of identification for that purpose. Stakeholder identification is a deliberate, elaborate process in which we brainstorm, we interact, and we try to explore and list down as many stakeholders as possible. And then we analyze them. Like in risk, after we identify the risk, we do the qualitative and quantitative analysis. I would say that this is as much in detail because even the stakeholders have to be qualitatively and quantitatively analyzed. And then we normally create, in risk, we create a risk response. Here we create a stakeholder engagement plan. Here we create a stakeholder engagement plan which outlines the portfolio management principles, processes, and activities to engage stakeholders. So I would like to say that this specific document, stakeholder engagement planning, this also provides us some kind of governance mechanism. So all those rules, processes, and principles relevant to the stakeholders may also be part of the portfolio governance. So there is a link with portfolio governance and stakeholder engagement. Then we have got stakeholder engagement activities, providing timely assessment of portfolio component, selection, prioritization, and performance, as well as early identification of portfolio level issues and risks. So this is like monitoring and control kind of thing, where this engagement is made possible through these activities. Portfolio communication facilitate a two-way effective dialogue between affected internal and external stakeholders. Now, briefly, we have executive managers, we have operational managers, we have governing bodies, we have sponsors, we have projects, programs, sub-portfolio, their respective managers, their respective teams, suppliers and external resource providers, regulatory bodies like government, and various others. So this is the level of portfolio stakeholder engagement. In order to develop the portfolio communications management plan, now you see, you have to have a stakeholder engagement plan and you have to have a communication plan. So both of these things here in portfolio are part of portfolio management. Sorry, part of portfolio stakeholder engagement. Stakeholder identification and analysis are necessary in addition to the determination of communication requirement. In planning portfolio level communications, the portfolio management plan may identify some of the primary stakeholders. So even when we are creating the portfolio management plan, some of the stakeholders might have been mentioned there, but we are elaborating even further. Planning may uncover additional stakeholders. When we move ahead, there might be all the time until the portfolio is live, any stakeholder could join in. So we have to keep identifying them till the end of the initiative. These additional discoveries are reflected as updates to the portfolio management plan. So if there are new stakeholders, they would be entertained in the portfolio management plan. Okay. As a comprehensive list of stakeholders is compiled, it is important to determine the stakeholders' information needs and their preferred mode of communication. What is their interest? What information do they need from the portfolio? And what is the means or mode of communication they would prefer to receive that information? Developing a strong communication management plan requires inputs from a variety of other portfolio management processes, such as performance and risk management. We have to have somehow linked to all of those things also. Portfolio communication recognizes broad and varied stakeholders, from executive management to individuals performing the basic tasks and third parties. The information needs of portfolio stakeholders are much more varied than the program or project level communication. It is very different, primarily because of the breadth and variety of stakeholders. A large set of stakeholders, so we have to deal with them very carefully. Transparency, as I said earlier, in planning portfolio management reporting is important for discovering early if elements are missing and for managing risk as a result of insufficient or inconsistent communication. Then this transparent communication is also valuable when planning for the optimal utilization of resources. On the next screen, you will see a table that lists various stakeholder roles and their typical level of interest. I'll just show that, but we need not read it out because that is a reference kind of a document. This is it. So portfolio sponsor, what are the roles the portfolio sponsor plays? What are the interests of this stakeholder? What are the expectations of this stakeholder? And you can read through it, and that will give you a very clear picture.
Yeah.
Okay, let's move to the guiding principles. Because all processes and activities in portfolio management involve some sort of communication, it could be stated that stakeholder engagement synergizes with all the other performance management domains of this standard. Not only with communication, but those other domains, right? Right from governance to, you know, risk and everything, value management, risk management, everything inclusive. The focus of this section is less on the regular exchange of information than is directly connected to the performance of portfolio management function and more on the conscious activity of engaging portfolio stakeholders through two-way communication and although all the principles of the portfolio management are suitable, but out of those 8 principles, we have selected 6 of them which could very clearly indicate their affiliation with the stakeholder engagement and communication. First, achieve excellence in strategy execution. Actually, indirectly, that is true because yes, we have to identify stakeholders and do communication accordingly. Enable transparency, responsibility, accountability, sustainability, and fairness. You remember that this was related to another area.
Governance.
But here, it also relates here as well. Then ensure that investments in portfolio components are aligned with the organization's strategy and governance practices. Obtain and maintain the sponsorship and engagement of senior management and key stakeholders. That is important. Foster a culture that embraces change and risk. And last but not the least is navigate complexity to enable successful outcomes. Okay. Definition and identification. I think we already know the definition.
Yeah.
Stakeholders are everywhere in portfolio, program, and project. There is great similarity in identifying and analyzing stakeholders across various domains. Whether you're talking about portfolio, program, or project, but generally the sequence is the same. We have to identify them, we have to analyze them, we have to develop a stakeholder engagement plan and all that. All the portfolio management activities are useful in program management, even in project management. Portfolio stakeholder engagement is essentially a strategic activity because the level is too high. Portfolio stakeholder engagement primarily deals with the stakeholders that operate at a strategic level, more so than those that operate directly at the program or project. It may also be that there are agreements and relationships at the strategic level that need to be honored in component programs and projects. This section concentrates on identifying the stakeholders who operate at the strategic level and then setting the plans for engagement. These are the policies and procedures of which all program and project stakeholders within the scope of portfolio should be appropriately cognizant. At this level, stakeholders include both key individuals as well as entities. In addition to acting at the strategic level, key focus of portfolio stakeholders is the delivery of strategy, specifically the stakeholder initiative that have been allocated to the portfolio. So strategic level stakeholder engagement, sensitive nature of portfolio information, categorization of stakeholders, and identifying them. This is about identification. It is critical that portfolio stakeholder identification and analysis activities do not inhibit or constrain the interaction with programs and projects more than necessary. So once we are trying to identify the stakeholders at the portfolio level, we must be mindful of the fact that, of course, we have to interact with a lot many stakeholders, but the stakeholders should think that it should not hinder in the portfolio process. Focus is on guidance and enablement rather than constraint. At the strategic level, the portfolio manager has access to information that may not be available at lower levels in the organization. The portfolio manager plays a key role in ensuring what? The alignment of current and future projects with the organization strategy, and may possess knowledge of how organizational capability will develop and what competence and capabilities will become available to programs and projects. Because of the potentially sensitive nature of portfolio information, especially relative to competitive and proprietary information generated and available at the highest level of the organization, precautions are usually established and enforced to limit access to certain stakeholders. Well, I think there is nothing to read. Things are, when you read through them, at least read through everything at least once.
Yeah.
So there is a lot of repetition, therefore I am not reading it again.
That's fine.
Stakeholders must be categorized. Existence of portfolio management in an organization implies that there are many programs or projects contemplated or in execution within the organization. By nature, any large organization operates in an environment that includes actual and potential suppliers, customers, competitors, regulators, and other interested parties, in addition to the internal stakeholders of the organization. So for that, let's develop a taxonomy, an ordered arrangement of groups or categories. The task of categorizing strategic stakeholders can be made easier if we can somehow create this taxonomy. Common language that is developed improves the interaction among portfolio components and helps reduce conflict. For example, when there are many people or projects in a portfolio, competition for scarce resources. There will be competition for scarce resources. Then standardized terminology can make it easier to resolve these issues. It can also help to establish a list of external stakeholders with whom pre-arrangements can be made. Now, when we're talking about categorization, there are many methods to that. Using the organization strategy for guidance, portfolio manager can identify types of stakeholders and start identifying preferred parties with whom to establish and maintain relationships. And maintain those relationships to further programs and projects. Note also that strategy is a relative term that depends on the domain in which the portfolio exists. It might be at the international or national level, organizational level, or even a business unit or lower level. How do we categorize the stakeholders in various categories or various brackets. These and other common activities can reduce portfolio components startup time and improve communication among component managers and stakeholders. So right from the beginning, we are trying to keep a good relationship between these two entities, those who are the component managers and those who are the stakeholders. Using the organization strategy for guidance, portfolio managers can identify types of stakeholders and start identifying preferred parties with whom to establish and maintain relationships and maintain those relationships to further program our project. Note also that strategy is a relative term that depends on the domain in which the portfolio is. Okay, this is the same example I have shown you already. Identification of the stakeholders. This is how we can analyze the portfolio stakeholder. Firstly, identifying stakeholder concerns and perspectives. Then diverse stakeholder interest and level. Importance of understanding regulatory content. Identification of stakeholders is an ongoing process. As I said, it should happen all the time. However, it is important to remember that in every group, there are 5 key members who need to be handled separately and individually. In order to identify the key concerns, it may be useful to express those concerns as in table 6.2. Let us look at that. What is the owner is a stakeholder, what is a concern? They need the solution to a problem or opportunity. And that's the owner. And in description context, it is written, expresses the need in strategy. That is called the strategic plan. Implementation agent. What is strategy implementation agent? This is it. Then describes who owns it, who designed it, who implemented it, and who is using. Okay, what else? Okay. Then we have got portfolio reports. They include a variety of reports such as portfolio status, progress report, performance report, portfolio risks report, and so on. This is the big picture. Portfolio performance reports can provide information on the total investment in each portfolio. What are the portfolio? At the portfolio level, like in the organization, we had organization process assets. But at a portfolio level, what are the various list of stakeholders from that perspective? So we have managers, we have status of why portfolio process area is different from the stakeholder list. Because they are the people who will receive the manager's roles and responsibilities, status report, profile, forecasting, governance, all of these this data is available and it is required by them. Communication infrastructure. Portfolio includes a list of portfolio components as well as information on the component, such as dependencies, level of effort, points of contact, and other dashboard types. So communication infrastructure, all the organizational portfolio management processes, policies, and technologies will form part of communication. Knowledge of component of the portfolio may have an effect on the communication approach. That is exactly what we said. Portfolio list of components is critical in understanding the full scope of communication needs. Portfolio management plan provides the scope and objective of the portfolio and the initial list of internal and external portfolio stakeholders, including the governance model. All elements of portfolio management plan have communication requirements, such as risks that need to be communicated to the governing body. So because communication requirements are so important to us, so whatever is generated from that, any complaint, anything, that will go into the archive. Portfolio communication management plan may be a subsidiary plan to portfolio management, or it may be included within the portfolio management plan. The portfolio governance plan also be subsidiary to the portfolio management plan. Then we have got portfolio process assets. Yeah. So these are the process assets. Processes are lessons recorded, decisions, and things like that. So all of these are the portfolio process assets. Okay, communication governance and interface to components. Elicitation techniques. I suppose you understand what the elicitation techniques are. We need not waste a lot of time here. Elicitation techniques are you are trying to read the mind of your stakeholders, and you are trying to elicit or suck out information from them, which can otherwise not be transmitted. So you elicit on any cue, you elicit with the stakeholder portfolio manager and try to interact with him. So it is important for the portfolio manager to engage with stakeholders. Other examples are good enough, but you see, brainstorming can be helpful in identifying new stakeholder groups. This is basically exercise into brainstorming.
Yeah.
So we have elicitation techniques and communication requirement analysis. These are the elicitation techniques and these are the communication requirement analysis. It says that communication requirement analysis is a vehicle or tool used to communicate information to the stakeholder, and the planned frequency is evaluated to determine whether changes should be made. List of available communication methods is charted to evaluate alternatives and ensure that optimal vehicle is being used to meet stakeholder needs. Reviews are conducted to identify any redundant communication. So this is how it is. These are some of the examples of communication metrics. Portfolio governance decisions could be coming out on quarterly or monthly basis. Intended recipients are likely to be project sponsor, program, portfolio manager, PMO, contracting officer, and maybe many other. And communication vehicle for this kind of decision is quarterly and monthly report. Portfolio dashboard may be weekly or monthly to be sent to sponsor, portfolio manager, and PMO, and communication vehicle could be email for governance and meeting distribution, portfolio dashboard on internal portal. Portfolio performance reports, again, that's almost the same thing. You can go through it, but this is what the communication requirement analysis is. Communication governance and interface to company. I think we have already discussed that this hooks into the governance domain, it hooks into the risk domain, and almost all the domains, because stakeholders are everywhere. So all the domains are put together. So there is at the governance level, there is an interface with most of the companies. How do we manage the portfolio communication? Naturally, adhering to the governance and stakeholder requirement, communication of portfolio changes whenever and wherever required, updating communications metrics, adopting the new communication needs, and subsidiary communication management plan. So you can go through this slide. This is the last slide, which I can do that with you. In communicating with portfolio stakeholders, it is important that both agreed upon governance and stakeholder communication requirements are constantly taken into consideration. This means that any changes to the portfolio content, governance, or roadmap are fed through to the stakeholders and the communication metric updated accordingly. During portfolio management plan execution, new communication or information management needs and methods may be written. These updates are included in the content of the portfolio management plan or in the subsidiary portfolio communication management. Anyways, I just rushed through it, but there was nothing which could be explained any better.
Yeah, that was pretty straightforward. Also, with the
it's pretty straightforward,
and it's similar to the project management one. Just trying to understand it on the portfolio, just to overlay it on the portfolio level, but the concepts are very similar. Yeah,
exactly. So there are a number of questions here. Probably you can do it yourself, no problem with it. And that is it. I think there are no comments as far as the communication is concerned.
Yeah.
Okay. So is it time for your meeting now?
Yeah, it'll be pretty soon. Appreciate it.
So I think I should close my today's session here. And next time we will start with value management. We'll cover in the next class value management and risk management. Right?
Yeah, I'm looking forward to those two. It sounds pretty interesting.
So today we were able to move very fast. Hope you did understand some of the things.
Yeah, it'd be good. Yeah, to take our time on these next two sections. I'm pretty interested in the value management. The risk management sounds pretty interesting, so we'll have a little more time on those two sections.
Sure. So let's call it a day today. Thank you very much for your.
Sure, great. As always, appreciate it. So we'll do it again on 23. Yeah.
You have time. You have enough time.
We'll do it again on the 23rd. That's our next session. That's our last session, June 23rd.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. I'm
2
sorry.
days.
Last portion of today was not recorded. No. It was.
Now we'll meet again in 2 days on June 23rd.